I was Julian Vance's private physician, hired for an exorbitant sum to manage his chronic gastritis. One evening, Julian was drugged. He instinctively dialed my number. His voice was a raw whisper, just my name, a plea. When I arrived, he pinned me against the wall. When I reached Julian Vance's estate, the long-serving butler, Mr. Henderson, was already waiting at the massive oak door. He expressed his relief at my arrival, explaining that Mr. Vance had been expecting me for some time. I managed a tight smile, wondering if he had administered any medication. On the phone, Julian had sounded profoundly distressed. The butler remained silent, simply gesturing for me to follow. The grand foyer was empty. He led me straight up the winding staircase to the second floor, to Julian's private suite. He knocked softly on the door and announced my presence before turning and descending the stairs with a speed that belied his age. The door creaked open, and the hallway light spilled across Julian's face, illuminating the feverish flush on his cheeks. He asked in a low, raspy voice what had taken me so long, sounding like a lost, rain-soaked animal. I asked if he was all right. He was not. In the next instant, the animal became a predator. One hand clamped around my wrist while the other slid to the small of my back, pulling me flush against him. The door slammed shut behind us. His kiss was a desperate, chaotic thing. The air grew thick and heavy, charged with a searing heat. A sliver of moonlight pierced the gap in the heavy drapes, casting long, tangled shadows on the floor. I opened my eyes to an unfamiliar, cream-colored ceiling. The arm beneath my neck was solid and radiated an intense warmth. I had slept with Julian Vance. My first thought was to run. Holding my breath, I inched my way out of the bed. The cold marble floor sent a jolt through my bare feet. Clothes were strewn everywhere. My boxer briefs were tangled on a chaise lounge, my shirt and pants discarded in opposite corners of the room. I gathered them all in my arms, my hands shaking as I dressed, cursing Julian under my breath. I eased the door open and closed it silently behind me, then bolted down the stairs, nearly colliding with Mr. Henderson, who had been absent all night. I clamped a hand over his mouth, then remembered his role as an accomplice and shot him a resentful glare. I hissed that he was not to mention I had been there. He simply blinked in understanding. I released him and fled the mansion like a thief, hailing the first cab I saw. Back at my apartment, I threw myself into the jacuzzi, the hot water turning the marks on my skin a more vibrant shade of crimson, especially across my chest and inner thighs. Staring at the evidence of the night, a wave of despair washed over me. This was not how a doctor was supposed to heal his patient. My relationship with Julian had always been pristine, a clear-cut contract. He had the ailment. I had the remedy. Now, everything was a tangled mess. Losing my dignity was a minor injury. Losing my job would be a fatal blow. Julian Vance was the perfect employer. Generous, hands-off, with incredible benefits. He was famously uninterested in women. A former assistant had been hauled out by security for removing her blazer mid-presentation. Nor was he interested in men. A potential business partner had once tried to set him up with a beautiful young man, an effort that not only failed but also scuttled the entire deal. So what would be the consequence of having slept with him? Catastrophic. I could practically see my generous salary and the new sports car I'd been saving for sprouting wings and flying away. I submerged myself completely, trying to cool the panic. But it was no use. Why hadn't my hands pushed him away? Why hadn't my mouth refused him? Was it because his lips were so feverish, or because the flush in his eyes from the drug was so alluring? Wait, drugged and drunk. He was completely out of his mind. He probably wouldn't remember a single pixel of what happened, let alone me. Just like that, the threat of unemployment seemed to vanish. For the next 2 weeks, Julian showed no sign of remembering anything. A single text message with a brief complaint about his stomach was enough to have me rushing to his side. When I'd arrive, Mr. Henderson would have a soothing herbal broth ready, alongside a spread of artisanal cheeses and light pastries. He was a truly considerate employer and an uncomplicated patient. I would run through my usual instructions, what he should and shouldn't do, which foods to favor and which to avoid. Julian would sit there, listening with the rapt attention of a star student, his posture perfect. He never mentioned that night, his expression so clear and untroubled it was as if it had never occurred. But it had. Julian may not remember, but I did. Every time I got close to him, my mind was flooded with explicit images from that night, and he remained blissfully unaware. On several occasions, I arrived just as he was stepping out of his shower, a single towel knotted around his waist. I had to suggest that perhaps he should get fully dressed before seeing me. He would frown slightly, asking why, noting that I'd never had an issue with it before. Before? Had I touched him, tasted him, been inside him before? No. Eventually, he started dressing beforehand, but it hardly mattered. I knew exactly what his body looked like beneath the fabric. I could trace the elegant lines of his muscles with my eyes closed. I was ruined. My previous feelings for him had been like admiring a perfectly roasted duck through a bakery window. A fleeting glance, a check of my wallet, and I'd move on, disciplined. But now I'd had a taste. The crisp skin, the succulent meat, the flavor that lingered on my tongue. Now, passing that window, my feet refused to move. I wanted to devour the whole thing, bones and all. I snapped my medical case shut, unable to meet his gaze. I told him to remember to take his medication and that I was leaving. Mr. Henderson tried to persuade me to stay for dinner, mentioning the chef had prepared the seared scallops I loved. I shook my head vigorously. If I stayed, it wouldn't be scallops I was craving. Stepping outside, the cool night air felt like a reprieve. At the intersection, the red traffic lights bled into a blur. I closed my eyes, but the images persisted. On impulse, I hailed a taxi and gave the driver the address for Prism, the most notorious gay bar on the north side of the city. I'd heard about it for years but had never gone. My desire for Julian, I reasoned, was a product of a life that had become too sterile. A single ripple was enough to capsize me. I needed to enrich my life, find other diversions. Then, that one night with Julian would become an insignificant footnote. Prism was everything it was rumored to be. On the dance floor, bodies moved as one under the sultry, pulsing lights. In a corner booth, a man looped his tie around another's wrist, his smile soft but his eyes burning. Another pair shared a sip of liquor mouth to mouth, their kiss slow and deep. The air was a cocktail of melting ice, faint tobacco, and an overwhelming surge of testosterone. I stood frozen, my throat dry. A stylish young man with bright lips and a sliver of exposed midriff approached and asked if I was alone. He was attractive but not my type. I lied about waiting for someone and made my way to the bar, determined to drink the strongest liquor and find the most compelling man in the room. The alcohol flowed, but no compelling men materialized. One was too muscular, another too frail. A man with a decent build had a face that looked like it had been assembled in a hurry. None of them were right. None of them were Julian. Julian was tall, with a lean, powerful build that was perfectly proportioned. The more I drank, the more vivid his image became in my mind. I shook my head to clear it, but the figures around me only grew fuzzier. A hand tapped my shoulder. I turned and recognized the face. I asked him what he was doing here, then, remembering the earlier pickup line, parroted it back, asking if he was alone too. It was Chris, Julian's best friend and business partner. He confirmed he was. Then his gaze swept the bar as he asked where Julian was. I didn't understand what Julian had to do with anything. I told him I was there to meet men. Chris raised an eyebrow and commended my nerve with a tone drenched in sarcasm that grated on me. Fueled by alcohol, I lunged forward and grabbed his face, telling him to shut his mouth. He swatted my hands away and patted my cheek. He then asked if I knew that Julian had a first love, a classmate from high school. I did not. My fingers froze midair as I pretended to be casual, asking what happened. Chris explained that the person had left him. Left him? I pressed, my speech quickening, asking if they broke up. Not exactly, he said, extinguishing the flicker of hope I'd felt. But if the person left him, wasn't that the same thing? The alcohol churned in my stomach, and a sour taste rose in my throat. I demanded to know why he was telling me this, insisting it had nothing to do with me. He suggested that maybe he was just trying to be kind, offering I didn't need it. I shook my head, but a wave of dizziness sent the room spinning. The world went dark and I pitched forward. Chris caught me with one arm, pulling out his phone. He made a quick call, informing someone that he had me, glanced down at my unconscious form, and added that I was completely out. The splash of cold water on my face shocked me back to consciousness, but my body felt limp, like overcooked pasta. Someone was half carrying me, guiding me into a car, then into a bathroom. The next time I opened my eyes, I was in a guest bedroom, wearing a clean set of pajamas. Julian stood beside the bed, rolling up his sleeves, the cuffs damp. Chris's words echoed in my mind. Julian had a first love. He left him. I sat up, grabbed the front of his shirt, and kissed him. It was clumsy, my lips crashing against his teeth. Julian turned his head away, his palm pressing against my shoulder to gently push me back. He told me I was drunk. I fell back against the pillows, admitting that I was. The next morning, a sliver of light from the window lanced through my skull. My throat was a desert. Fragments of the previous night returned. The bar, the shower, Julian pushing my kiss away. I sat up, my scalp prickling with anxiety. The door opened and Julian walked in. He told me to get washed up and come down for breakfast. I mumbled my agreement. Then my eyes caught a small cut on the corner of his lip. From my teeth last night. I clutched the duvet, my voice trembling as I said his name. Julian, his hand on the doorknob, turned back to look at me. At that moment, Chris's words about being kind and offering exploded in my head. My bravado from the night before deflated, and my shoulders slumped. I apologized for the previous night. He was silent for a moment, his gaze sweeping over me before he advised me not to drink so much in the future. Then he left. At the breakfast table, Mr. Henderson placed a bowl of oatmeal in front of me, chiding me gently for drinking so excessively. I offered a weak smile, stirring my spoon aimlessly. I managed a few bites before putting it down. Mr. Henderson frowned, asking if that was all I was going to eat. I shook my head, unable to manage more. As he continued to coax me, Julian set his utensils down with a sharp clatter from across the table. His voice was cold enough to freeze water when he ordered me to finish it and not to waste food. I quickly ate the rest of the oatmeal, made an excuse about an appointment, and left. Walking down the street, I couldn't make sense of it. The first time I ran. This time I ran again. Was it always me who fled simply because I was in his house? I let out a bitter laugh. Even if it wasn't his house, he wouldn't be the one running. He was perfectly composed. I was the one with the guilty conscience. By telling me I was drunk, he was telling me that nothing I did in that state counted. Last night didn't count. And the night he was drugged certainly didn't count. Whether he had a first love or not was irrelevant to me. It was clear I needed to quit drinking. For 7 straight days, Julian didn't contact me. I stared at his name pinned to the top of my empty message inbox, my thoughts drifting to the termination agreement my assistant had mentioned. I wondered if he was actually going to fire me. Even if he did, I had the skills to land on my feet anywhere. But the thought of never seeing him again left a hollow ache in my chest. I tossed my phone aside in frustration. It chimed with a new message. I snatched it up. It was Julian. He told me to pack a bag. I was to accompany him on a business trip the next day. The trip was to a small, private island off the coast of Maine. The sky there was a piercing blue, the beaches soft and pale. Colorful fishing boats bobbed in the harbor. The sea breeze was gentle. We stayed in a small but beautiful cottage with 2 bedrooms and a small yard whose gate opened directly onto the beach. At night, you could hear the wind rustling the leaves and the steady rhythm of the waves. It was the perfect place for a vacation, and Julian did seem to be on one. Usually, an assistant would accompany him on such trips, but this time it was just the 2 of us. When I asked, he said it was just a preliminary site visit, and there was no need to disrupt his employees' time off. What a great boss, I thought wryly. He couldn't bear to trouble his actual staff, but had no problem troubling me. The next morning, he dragged me out before 5 to watch the sunrise. I followed him barefoot, the cool sand waking me up. Julian wasn't talkative, so I initiated, asking if he liked the ocean. He gave a quiet affirmation. I said I did too. That was the end of the conversation. After the sunrise, we took a ferry, fed gulls, collected seashells, and ate delicious, fresh-caught fish. It was a shame Julian's stomach couldn't handle it. He suggested we stay to watch the sunset before heading back, and I agreed. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the sky shifting from gold to a deep crimson, Julian suddenly asked if I was happy. I paused, then nodded. I was very happy. He smiled, but his eyes, though fixed on me, seemed to be looking through me, at something far away. I wasn't even sure he was seeing me at all. In that moment, he reminded me of the little prince, who had watched the sunset 43 times in one day. I couldn't help but ask if he was happy. Of course, he said, his voice so light it seemed the wind could carry it away. The weather by the sea was fickle. The morning had been clear, but now rain was lashing against the windows. An old friend of Julian's had heard he was in the area and had called him out. Julian asked if I wanted to come along, but I declined. It wasn't appropriate for an employee to attend a boss's private social gathering. After closing the windows in my room, I went to check on his. Sure enough, the rain had blown in, soaking the desk by the window. The wind had also flipped open a leather-bound notebook lying there. It was a journal. Logic told me to close the window and leave, but curiosity won. It wasn't a daily diary. The entries were sporadic. March 21st, 2009. Mom, it's been 20 days since you left. Dad brought Linda home today. She packed everything of yours into black trash bags and threw it all out. The rose bushes you planted in the yard were just starting to bud, and she ripped them out too. I came home from school and found them in your bed, tangled together. A coldness spread through me, and my stomach revolted. I barely made it to the bathroom before I was sick, and there was blood in the toilet when I was done. April 1st, 2009. Linda is pregnant. She's afraid of Buddy and wants to get rid of him. But Buddy is a good dog. He never bites. For some reason, he started barking wildly at her today. When Dad got home, there was a heavy thud from the yard. I ran out. In the moonlight, Buddy was lying on his side, his belly rising and falling so slowly. I called his name. His tail gave one weak wag and then he was still. I picked him up and held him on my lap. He was quiet, just like you were in the hospital. Frighteningly quiet. April 2nd, 2009. This morning, I automatically reached for the bag of dog food and poured it into his empty bowl. The silence in the kitchen was deafening. I knelt down and picked the kibble out one by one and put it back in the bag. I forgot. I don't have to feed Buddy anymore. May 21st, 2009. Dad fired Mrs. Gable. She knew about my stomach and would make me special meals. Linda told Dad she was spoiling me. I begged Mrs. Gable not to go. She just patted my hand, her eyes welling up, and told me to grow up fast. Later, I told Dad I wanted to go.